The newspaper office door slammed open so hard the wall clock jumped, and Ethan Walker stepped inside with dust on his coat and blood drying across one knuckle. He did not look like a man hunting romance. He looked like a man trying to keep a dead ranch breathing one more day. In his fist was a wrinkled paper notice, and across the street, through the office window, Clara Bennett stood outside the Silver Creek eating house, a heavy-set woman in a faded brown dress, pretending not to hear the laughter that followed her wherever she went. That morning, Red Hollow Ranch had lost 3 more cattle to thirst. The last hired man had packed for the silver mines, and the banknote in Ethan's pocket said he had 3 months before Caleb Boone could take everything. But the part nobody in town understood was this: Caleb did not want Ethan's dry old ranch for the cows. He wanted what lay under the ground. Ethan pushed the paper toward the printer. "Run it tomorrow," he said. The printer lifted his spectacles, read the notice once, then read it again with a grin spreading under his grey moustache. Wanted he said aloud, just loud enough for the 2 men by the press to hear. A wife for Red Hollow Ranch. Must cook clean and mind the chickens. No foolish romantic expectations. The office broke into laughter. One man slapped the press table. Another leaned back and said, Ethan must be the first man in Nevada too poor to hire a cook, and too proud to admit he needed a wife. The printer asked if he wanted the notice placed beside mule sales or lost livestock. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he did not take the paper back. A proud man might have walked out. A desperate man stood still. Outside, Clara turned from the eating house window. She had heard every word. She also heard Marla Finch's sweet voice drift from the boardwalk behind her. "Lord help the woman who answers," that Marla said, though I reckon some women ought to be grateful for chickens. The ladies beside her laughed into their gloves. Clara lowered her eyes, but she did not move away. She had washed dishes since before sunrise. Her hands were red from lye water. Her back ached from bending over tubs. All her life, folks had looked at her and decided what she could not be before she ever opened her mouth. But that notice did not ask for beauty. It asked for work. And if you have ever been laughed at so long that even a hard bargain starts looking like mercy, then you know why Clara Bennett kept listening. Ethan stepped back into the street, hat-low face closed. He passed within 10 feet of Clara and never truly saw her. Not yet. Behind them, inside the newspaper office, the printer pinned the notice for tomorrow's edition. Across town, in the polished bank building, Caleb Boone was already smiling over Ethan's debt papers. And just as Clara reached for the folded newspaper proof the printer had tossed aside, a hot Nevada wind dragged red dust down the street like a warning. The newspaper office door slammed open so hard the wall clock jumped, and Ethan Walker stepped inside with dust on his coat and blood drying across one knuckle. He did not look like a man hunting romance. He looked like a man trying to keep a dead ranch breathing one more day. In his fist was a wrinkled paper notice, and across the street, through the office window, Clara Bennett stood outside the Silver Creek eating house. A heavy-set woman in a faded brown dress, pretending not to hear the laughter that followed her wherever she went. That morning, Red Hollow Ranch had lost 3 more cattle to thirst. The last hired man had packed for the silver mines, and the banknote in Ethan's pocket said he had 3 months before Caleb Boone could take everything. But the part nobody in town understood was this: Caleb did not want Ethan's dry old ranch for the cows. He wanted what lay under the ground. Ethan pushed the paper toward the printer. "Run it tomorrow," he said. The printer lifted his spectacles, read the notice once, then read it again with a grin spreading under his grey moustache. Wanted he said aloud, just loud enough for the 2 men by the press to hear. A wife for Red Hollow Ranch. Must cook clean and mind the chickens. No foolish romantic expectations. The office broke into laughter. One man slapped the press table. Another leaned back and said, Ethan must be the first man in Nevada too poor to hire a cook and too proud to admit he needed a wife. The printer asked if he wanted the notice placed beside mule sales or lost livestock. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he did not take the paper back. A proud man might have walked out. A desperate man stood still. Outside, Clara turned from the eating-house window. She had heard every word. She also heard Marla Finch's sweet voice drift from the boardwalk behind her. "Lord help the woman who answers that," Marla said. "Though I reckon some women ought to be grateful for chickens." The ladies beside her laughed into their gloves. Clara lowered her eyes, but she did not move away. She had washed dishes since before sunrise. Her hands were red from lye water. Her back ached from bending over tubs. All her life, folks had looked at her and decided what she could not be before she ever opened her mouth. But that notice did not ask for beauty. It asked for work. And if you have ever been laughed at so long that even a hard bargain starts looking like mercy, then you know why Clara Bennett kept listening. Ethan stepped back into the street, hat low, face closed. He passed within 10 feet of Clara and never truly saw her. Not yet. Behind them, inside the newspaper office, the printer pinned the notice for tomorrow's edition. Across town in the polished bank building, Caleb Boone was already smiling over Ethan's debt papers. And just as Clara reached for the folded newspaper proof the printer had tossed aside, a hot Nevada wind dragged red dust down the street like a warning. Ethan read the bank letter twice before he handed it to Clara. The paper was clean stiff and cruel in the way only money can be cruel when it belongs to another man. Caleb Boone reminded him that Red Hollow Ranch stood 3 months from foreclosure. Interest would continue. Penalties would be reviewed. Any failure to maintain the property, livestock, or income could be used as proof that Ethan Walker was unfit to keep the note. Clara did not understand every legal turn of phrase, but she understood the shape of it. Caleb was not waiting for payment. He was waiting for collapse. At noon, Caleb came himself. He rode in a polished black buggy, wearing a grey suit too fine for the dust. Marla Finch sat beside him beneath a lace parasol, her smile soft enough to pass for kindness from far away. Ethan met them at the porch with his sleeves rolled and his face hard. Clara stood behind him in the kitchen doorway, flour on her apron, a fresh egg basket in her hands. "Mr. Walker," Caleb said, stepping down, "I came to offer concern." "Concern don't usually wear a bank seal," Ethan answered. Caleb's eyes moved past him to Clara. They paused only a second, but the insult was plain. "And this must be the new Mrs. Walker. Silver Creek has been entertained by your advertisement." Marla gave a light laugh. "I do hope the chickens appreciate the arrangement." Clara's cheeks warmed, but she did not lower the basket. Caleb unfolded another paper. He said the bank had the right to inspect the ranch's condition. He spoke of unpaid balances, low herd, value, neglected assets, and the possibility of early seizure if Red Hollow's income dropped further. Every word sounded polite. Every word carried a knife. Ethan stepped forward, but Clara moved first. Not in front of him like a fighter. Beside him like a wife who had chosen the same weather. "No one from that bank comes into my kitchen, my storeroom, or my henhouse without my say," she said. Marla blinked. Caleb smiled thinner. "Your henhouse?" "The one you find so amusing." Ethan looked down at Clara, then, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. He had stood against armed men before, but she stood against a banker with nothing but a basket of eggs and a back that still ached from labor. Caleb folded the paper slowly. "Then I suggest you make those chickens profitable, Mrs. Walker. A ranch cannot survive on pride." After the buggy left, Ethan said, "You should have let me handle him." Clara turned toward the chicken yard. "You have handled him your way for years and he still owns the note." The words were not sharp. That made them worse. Ethan said nothing while she carried the eggs inside. From that day, Clara worked as if a clock had been nailed above every door. She cleaned the last rot from the coop, separated weak birds, mixed feed from cracked corn, kitchen scraps, and desert seeds old Ruth had once taught her to save. She rubbed herbs into sick hens' water and marked each laying bird with a bit of thread. At night, when Ethan thought she slept, she sat at the kitchen table with a stub pencil, counting eggs, flour, salt jars, and every penny that passed through her hand. Within 2 weeks, she carried her first proper basket into Silver Creek. The town gave her no mercy. Men outside the saloon called her Ethan's chicken bride. A girl near the mercantile whispered loud enough for her mother to laugh. Marla Finch stepped from the dressmaker's porch and asked whether Ethan had married her in church or simply set a ring around the hen yard. Clara's fingers tightened on the basket handle until the reed creaked. Then she walked into Samuel Pike's hotel and set 12 eggs on his counter. Samuel frowned. Red hollow eggs used to come in dirty and half-cracked. These did not, Clara said. He almost refused her. Then Clara cracked one into a white saucer she had brought wrapped in cloth. The yolk rose gold and firm. The kitchen boy leaned closer. Samuel said nothing for a long moment. "I'll take the dozen," he said at last, "but only the dozen." The next week he took 3 dozen. After that, Clara brought more than eggs. Salted eggs sealed in jars. Honey corn cakes rich with yolk. Dried egg noodles cut thin and packed for miners. Chicken fat rendered clean for cooking. She wrote the name Red Hollow Golden Eggs on each brown paper packet in careful letters. Some laughed at first. Then the stage station bought noodles because they kept through heat. A miner's wife bought salted eggs because fresh ones spoiled too fast. Samuel ordered corn cakes for breakfast. Guests headed to Reno. Money began entering Red Hollow in small, stubborn amounts. Not enough to save the ranch, not yet, but enough to buy feed, enough to keep one hired man, enough to make Ethan unfold Clara's ledger one evening and stare at the columns as if numbers had learned to speak. "This is from chickens," he asked. "From not wasting what chickens give," Clara said. That night, he patched the hen house roof without being asked. He worked by lantern light, hammering boards into place, while Clara stood below holding nails in her apron. Neither of them called it an apology. Still, when he climbed down, he did not step away from her as quickly as before. The town's laughter began changing shape. It did not disappear. It sharpened. Caleb heard about the hotel orders. Marla heard about women asking Clara how to preserve eggs in summer heat. Samuel Pike mentioned, in front of half the dining room, that Mrs. Walker made the finest traveling noodles between Silver Creek and Carson Road. By the next Sunday, Clara found 2 poor widows waiting near the ranch gate, asking if she needed help washing jars. Ethan started to send them away. Red Hollow could barely feed itself. Clara touched his sleeve. "If we pay them fair, they will work fair. If we grow, we all eat." So the widows stayed. One had 3 children and no cow. The other had been turned out of the laundry after her husband died. Clara set them to cleaning jars, cutting noodles, packing cakes, and gathering eggs. She fed them at noon from the same pot she fed Ethan. Word traveled faster than any wagon. Red Hollow was no longer only a failing ranch. It was becoming a place where women no one valued could earn honest money. That was when Clara found the first wrong number. She'd been copying the bank figures into her ledger when she noticed Ethan's old receipt from April showed a payment Caleb's new letter did not mention. Then another. A partial interest payment from the sale of 2 horses had vanished from the balance. She spread the papers across the table and pressed one hand over her mouth. Ethan saw her face and reached for his gun belt. "No," Clara said. "If he cheated me, then a bullet will only make him look respectable." She turned the receipts toward him. "You kept land with a rifle all your life. Let me try keeping this house with paper." Ethan looked at the receipts, then at Clara. The woman he had asked to mine chickens had found a wound in the bank's own handwriting. By the end of that week, the truth was plain enough to frighten her. Caleb Boone did not want Red Hollow because of dead cattle or old fences. He wanted it because a hidden water vein under Ethan's land could make a dry ranch worth more than half the valley. And if Clara's ledger proved the bank had lied, Caleb's clean paper empire could crack. Near midnight, a dog barked once and went silent. Clara rose from bed and saw a lantern moving low beside the henhouse. Then came the scrape of a latch, the flutter of frightened wings, and a man's shadow slipping through the yard with a sack in one hand. Clara did not scream when she saw the shadow at the henhouse. Screaming wasted breath, and breath was better spent moving. She grabbed Ethan's coat from the peg and shook him awake. By the time his boots hit the floor, the chickens had broken into a wild panic, wings beating against wire and wood. Ethan reached for his rifle, but Clara caught his sleeve. "Don't shoot blind," she whispered. "He wants trouble loud enough for town." That stopped him for half a second, long enough for both of them to hear the second sound, the dry scratch of flame catching straw. Ethan ran first. Clara came behind him with a water pail in each hand, her night braid loose down her back and her bare feet thrust into unlaced boots. The henhouse door hung open. A lantern lay broken near the nesting wall. Fire crawled up the straw like a living thing. In the yard, a sack had been cut open, and 2 foxes, maddened by fear and hunger, snapped at the scattering hens. The man with the sack bolted for the wash. But Ethan saw only enough of him to know he had been paid, not hungry. He raised the rifle, then lowered it when a hen flew across his sight. Clara was already inside the burning coop, beating flame with a wet feed sack. Smoke swallowed her shoulders. Ethan shouted, "Get the birds out." There was no gentleness in that order, and Ethan obeyed it because it was right. He kicked the side gate open and drove the living birds toward the empty tool shed. Clara dragged the sick hen crate out with both hands, coughing hard enough to bend over, then went back for the wooden box where she kept her newest hatching eggs. A roof beam cracked above her. Ethan crossed the yard in 3 strides and pulled her back just as the beam fell into the nesting row. She fought him once, not from anger, but from grief. The eggs. "You're worth more than eggs." The words came out before he had time to guard them. Clara went still against him, smoke on her face, tears cutting pale tracks through soot. Then another wall flared, and there was no room left for tenderness. They fought the fire until dawn. By sunrise, 1/3 of the henhouse was black timber. 27 birds lay dead. The best laying nests were gone. Clara knelt in the dirt and lifted one burned board at a time, looking for anything that might still live. Ethan stood beside her with bloody hands and a fury he could barely hold inside his ribs. "I'm riding to Silver Creek," he said. "Caleb sent him." Clara did not look up. "Of course he did." "Then I'll drag him out of that bank. And he'll call you violent, unstable, ruined by debt. He'll say Red Hollow is unsafe. He'll make the council take this place before we can speak." Ethan's breath came hard. "Then what do we do?" Clara lifted a blackened egg from the ashes. It broke in her palm, and she closed her hand around it like a promise. "We bring every paper we have. We bring every customer who bought from us. We bring what survived, and we make him answer in daylight." By noon, Clara had washed her face, pinned her hair, wrapped her burned hands in clean cloth, and packed her ledger. Old receipts, Samuel Pike's hotel orders, and Ethan's bank letters into a flour sack. Ethan hitched the wagon with a look that said he still wanted the rifle. Clara placed it under the seat, unloaded. The ride into Silver Creek felt longer than all the miles between them and Reno. People stepped onto porches as the wagon passed. Some had heard about the fire. Some had heard Caleb Boone plan to call the debt early. Marla Finch stood outside the dressmaker's shop in a blue silk gown and watched Clara climb down from the wagon with soot still dark beneath one ear. "Poor thing," Marla said softly. "Some women are simply not made for hard places." Clara looked at her. Hard places made me. The town council met in the courthouse room above the jail, where the windows stuck from heat and oil lamps left yellow stains on the walls. A judge from Carson Road was passing through that week and had agreed to sit with the council. Caleb had planned it that way. He liked official rooms, he liked benches seals and men who believed neat paper before tired women. By the time Clara and Ethan entered, Caleb was already standing near the front table, calm as church glass. Beside him lay the bank ledger, a foreclosure notice, and a new statement showing that Ethan owed more than he could pay in 10 days. Ethan's name was called first. Caleb spoke smoothly. He said Red Hollow had been mismanaged. He said last night's fire proved the property was deteriorating beyond responsible care. He said Ethan Walker's temper was known in town, and that the bank had shown mercy long past good sense. Then he turned to Clara with a courteous bend of his head. As for Mrs. Walker's little egg business, the bank admires domestic effort. But cakes and chickens cannot erase a legal debt. A few men chuckled. Not many, but enough. Clara stood with her flour sack held to her waist. Ethan started to rise, but she put one wrapped hand over his wrist. The judge looked at her. Mrs. Walker, do you claim the bank's figures are false? Yes, sir. Caleb smiled as if she had stepped exactly where he wanted. Then I welcome her proof. Clara laid out her receipts one by one. April horse sale payment. May interest payment. Feed credit returned against balance. Samuel Pike's first hotel contract. The judge examined them, and for a moment the room leaned toward her. Then Caleb opened his ledger. Each payment appeared there, but smaller. Some dates differed. One receipt number had been marked void. His books were bound, signed, and sealed. Clara's papers were folded smoke-stained and carried in a flour sack. The judge frowned. Mrs. Walker, a private household ledger does not outweigh bank records without corroboration. Caleb's smile deepened. Ethan rose. Those records are crooked. The sheriff by the door stepped forward. Sit down, Walker. Ethan did not sit. His face had gone white with the effort of holding himself back. Caleb said gently, This is precisely the instability the bank fears. For one terrible moment, Clara saw it all turning against them. The burned henhouse, the dead birds, the official ledger, Ethan standing one breath from arrest. The town watching, ready to become silent again. Then Samuel Pike rose from the back bench. He removed his hat slowly. He looked at Caleb, then at the judge, then at Clara's wrapped hands. I bought from Mrs. Walker, he said. Paid cash for some orders, signed for others. Those dates she gave are true. Caleb did not look worried. Mr. Pike runs a hotel, not a bank. No, Samuel said, but I know when a man checks out of my hotel. The room shifted. Samuel stepped forward with a page from his register. On April 23rd, Mr. Boone's ledger says Ethan Walker signed a void return at the bank before noon. But Ethan was in my dining room at noon selling 2 horses to a freight man from Reno. I saw the money change hands. Mrs. Walker's receipt says he paid the bank that afternoon. Boone's ledger says the receipt was void that morning. Both things can't be true. Caleb's jaw tightened for the first time. The judge looked toward the bank clerk seated near the wall, a narrow young man with ink on 2 fingers. You worked that desk. The clerk swallowed. His eyes moved to Caleb. Caleb's voice stayed soft. Careful, son. A man's future depends on honesty. The clerk half rose, then sat back down. Fear shut his mouth. Clara felt the room losing courage again. She reached into the flour sack and pulled out one more thing, a copy of Caleb's latest penalty notice, the one that claimed hidden fees Ethan had never agreed to. Its corner had blackened in the henhouse fire, but the words were clear enough. Judge Clara said, "Look at the seal." The judge took it. Clara turned to the clerk. "You brought that notice to Red Hollow 3 days ago. You told me the bank had just filed the penalty review, but that seal was pressed over ink that had already dried and cracked, and the date underneath was scraped thin." The clerk closed his eyes. Caleb said, "She knows chickens." "Your Honor, not seals." Old Ruth's voice rose from the rear bench. No one had seen her come in. "She knows enough. I sold Caleb Boone the scraping blade myself. He said it was for cleaning labels off medicine bottles." A nervous laugh ran through the room and died fast. The judge held the notice closer to the lamp. The scraped date showed beneath the new one, faint but visible. He called the clerk forward again. This time the young man stood. His voice failed once. He looked at Caleb, then at Clara's bandaged hands, then at Ethan, standing beside her like he finally understood that the strongest person in the room was not the one carrying a gun. "I changed the ledger," the clerk whispered. "Mr. Boone told me to mark 2 payments smaller and void 1 receipt. He said Walker would lose the ranch anyhow." He drew a breath that shook. "And he said once the place was seized, the water rights would be worth 10 times the debt." The room went silent enough to hear the lamps burn. Caleb's control broke slowly. First his mouth, then his eyes, then the fine banker's stillness he had worn for years like a good coat. The judge ordered the foreclosure notice withdrawn. The hidden penalties were struck from the record. Ethan's missing payments were restored. Caleb Boone was removed from handling the Walker note, pending formal charges for fraud. The councilman, ashamed now that shame was safe, voted to record the corrected balance before every witness in the room. No one cheered at first. Justice, when it comes late, often arrives too heavy for noise. Then Samuel Pike stood and said he would extend Clara's hotel contract through winter. One widow raised her hand and offered to help rebuild the henhouse. Another man promised lumber at cost. Even the sheriff, red-faced, stepped away from Ethan and muttered that no arrest was needed. Marla Finch slipped out before the meeting ended. Clara remained standing until the judge handed back her papers. Only then did her knees weaken. Ethan caught her elbow, not to lead her, but to steady her. Outside, the town looked different and exactly the same. Same dust, same boardwalk, same saloon doors. But when Clara stepped down from the courthouse, the people of Silver Creek moved aside for her, not because of her size, not because she was Ethan Walker's wife on paper, but because every one of them had watched a woman they mocked save a ranch with burned hands and a flour sack full of truth. Ethan helped her into the wagon. For a long while, neither spoke. Then he took off his hat, held it in both hands, and said, "Clara, I have been a fool." She looked toward the road home where smoke still marked the place her henhouse had burned. "Yes," she said softly, "but not an incurable one." Ethan almost smiled. Almost. Behind them, the courthouse bell rang once, not for celebration, for record. The truth had been entered where Caleb Boone could not erase it. But Red Hollow still had a burned henhouse, dead birds, a wounded business, and a woman who had not yet decided whether a man's respect could grow into something strong enough to trust. Red Hollow did not heal in a single morning. The henhouse stood black and open to the sky for 3 days, and every time Clara crossed the yard, she slowed without meaning to. A dropped pan still made the surviving birds scatter. At night, she woke when coyotes cried from the ridge, and Ethan would find her sitting near the kitchen window, watching the road as if another lantern might come creeping low through the dark. He never told her not to be afraid. He only sat across from her, set coffee between them, and kept the lamp burning until her hands stopped shaking. By the next week, wagons began arriving. Samuel Pike sent lumber from town. Old Ruth brought herbs, and 2 crates of strong brown hens from a Paiute widow she trusted. The laundry widow came with her boys. The miner's wife brought jars. Men who had laughed from the saloon now stood awkwardly in the yard offering nails hinges and work they did not know how to apologize for. Clara accepted the help, but not quickly. Trust came hard to a woman who had been mocked easier than she had been thanked. Ethan understood that too late, but he understood it truly. He no longer called the chickens useless. He no longer spoke of the kitchen as if it were outside the ranch's real labor. He built the new henhouse with wider shade, cleaner water troughs, and a locked feed room because Clara asked for it. When she showed him her plans for more nesting rows, he did not argue. He fetched a pencil. By autumn, red hollow golden eggs traveled farther than Ethan's cattle ever had. Samuel Pike ordered weekly. The stage station bought dried noodles by the crate. Miners carried Clara's salted eggs into the hills. A merchant from Reno put her name in print, and soon newspapers from Carson City to Virginia City were talking about the ranch wife who had turned a forgotten hen yard into steady Nevada money. But the thing that changed Red Hollow most was not the money. It was the table. There were more chairs now. Widows ate there at noon. Children sat with bread in both hands and no fear of being told they had taken too much. A girl Marla Finch had once dismissed from service learned to keep accounts under Clara's patient eye. The laundry widow's oldest boy was paid to deliver orders into town, and he walked taller each time he came back with coins in his pocket. Still, one fear remained. Whenever a buggy came from Silver Creek, Clara's shoulders tightened. She would glance at Ethan first as if needing proof the old bargain had not returned the paper marriage, the cold notice. The words no foolish, romantic expectations. One evening after the first cool wind of the season moved over the yard, Ethan found her standing by the new henhouse door. The sunset turned the red dust soft, and the hens murmured behind clean wire. A freight wagon waited near the gate loaded for Reno, with boxes marked in Clara's careful hand. Ethan held out a small wooden box. Clara looked at it, then at him. "If that is another bank paper, I may throw it at you." "No, ma'am," he said. "I reckon I have earned that." Inside was a plain silver ring. No diamond. No city shine. Just a small band engraved with a hen on one side and a Nevada star on the other. Clara covered her mouth, half laughing and half trying not to cry. Ethan's voice roughened. "When I put that notice in the paper, I wanted a wife to mind the chickens. I was blind enough to think that was the smallest work on this ranch." He looked toward the henhouse, the women packing crates, the wagon road, the home she had rebuilt one stubborn day at a time. Turns out, that was where the Lord hid the finest thing I ever had. Clara's eyes filled. He took off his hat. "I married you once with a bargain. If you will have me, Clara, I would like to marry you again with honor." She did not answer right away. She looked toward the road where people had laughed, toward the house where she had first slept, like a hired stranger, toward the henhouse that had burned and risen stronger. Then she held out her hand. "Only if you understand one thing, Ethan Walker." "Yes, ma'am. I do not belong behind you." He smiled then fully. "No. You belong beside me." Months later, Nevada was still talking about Clara Walker. But at Red Hollow, she was not a joke, not a curiosity, not the wife Ethan found in a newspaper notice. She was the name on the crates, the hand in the ledger, the woman at the head of the table, and the heart of a ranch that had learned how to live again. And whenever travelers asked Ethan if Red Hollow was the place where Clara Walker turned chickens into gold, he would smile toward the henhouse and shake his head. "No," he would say. Clara did not turn chickens into gold. She only taught the rest of us how late we were in seeing what was precious. If this story reminded you that the smallest work can carry the greatest worth, write Clara saw the gold in the comments and tell us where you are watching from. Subscribe for more frontier stories where mercy, courage, and honest hands still matter.